How's it going, everyone? The Packers have signed a new safety into their now plethora of safeties that we currently have on our roster in Jonathan Owens. So Jonathan Owens, he played for the Houston Texans last year and played all 17 games. He currently stands at 5'11", 210 pounds. Not the tallest, but a good size. He ran a 4.43 40-yard dash with a 1.55 10-yard split, so he's got really good speed. He also ended up with a 43-inch vertical jump and an 11-foot broad jump, so has very good explosiveness. And he's a bit of an intriguing player. He's not on the taller side, but he's still got a good build. And he had a high RAS score of a 9.72, which the Packers always tend to love. Now, the problem is, yes, he did start with the Houston Texans all last season, but he wasn't good if we're going to look at his PFF stats. So in 2020, he didn't really play much. He had a 50.7 defensive rating. Then in 2021, he played a lot more for 168 snaps. Had a 73.1 defensive rating and 65.6 run defense, 65.6 tackling, and a 71.1 coverage grade. Decent stats. And then last year, he ended up playing all 17 games, and he had a decent season depending on what you're looking at. So his stats on defense, he had 89 solo tackles, 28 assisted tackles, and only missed 11 tackles total, which ended up being about 8% missed tackle percentage. So not terrible, but then his passer rating allowed. He allowed a 124.8 passer rating. When he was targeted, it was terrible. He allowed 15.7 yards per reception. And you can see his defensive grade, 48.3 with a 45.9 run defense grade. Terrible. His only saving grace was essentially his tackling, which is an 80.9. He was a very good tackler for them. But in coverage, 49. And it's hard to say if it was him or the Houston Texans, because Houston Texans were bad last year. I'm not entirely sure if they were trying to tank. It seemed like they were trying to tank. But overall, they were just a bad team. And of course, the stats aren't always indicative of the players. Like, we've had players even on the Packers where, yeah, they were a tackling machine, like Blake Martinez. Like, he tackled and always had a high amount of tackles. The problem was, he's a middle linebacker, and he's tackling them when they've already gotten 6 yards, so he wasn't really a good player. So on the stat sheet, yeah, he's a good tackler, but it's also curious why you're a free safety. You're making 120 tackles. What's going on in front of you? And is he playing more in the box and that's why he's getting burned in coverage? It's hard to say. So it's a bit of an intriguing signing for the Packers. We have a ton of safeties currently on our roster, and I don't know which one's going to start or who potentially is going to start. As of right now, Darnell Savage has the most starting experience out of all of them. And even he's a bit of a liability. But if we don't ask him to do things that he's terrible at, he might be a serviceable safety. Then in Jonathan Owens, he's got the second most starting experience, but not by much because he's only started 17 games, which was all last season. Then behind him is like Rudy Ford, who started 13 games. So there aren't a lot of starting experience despite how many safeties we have. Now, he didn't just play defense for the Houston Texans. He did also play a lot of special teams for them and ended up playing about half of the special team snaps for them. So when you can see here in 2020, he's used a bit everywhere. Kick return, kick coverage, punt returns, and punt coverage and field goal blocking. He was used everywhere. In 2020, had a 68.5 rating. 2021, 65.7. Then in 2022, a 64.9. So he had decent grades on the special teams. So this is, once again, another player who's at the safety position that can play special teams. And I don't know how much influence Rich Bisaccia is having on all of this, but we have 10 players now at the safety position and probably about 8 or 9 of them that have special teams experience. And it's going to be interesting what the Packers decide, because 10 is an astronomical number of safeties to have on the roster. Granted, it's just the offseason. We're having a lot of competition trying to find a starter. Could it be Jonathan Owens? Maybe he has the most starting experience, and he could have been in a bad situation with the Houston Texans, because the Houston Texans haven't been good in his career, and a short career at that. So he might just need a venue change. We have hit before with like Devondre Campbell and Rasul Douglas, who were pretty much nobodies. They came to the Packers, and they became these all-stars. Jonathan Owens could be that, might not be. Chardavius Moore, who we also signed, Could be, maybe not. He did play for the 49ers, and that's a stacked defense. So maybe he couldn't just find his way or just had bad luck, especially with his injuries. So it's going to be interesting what's going to come out of this safety room. And I'm not entirely sure if this fully closes the door on Adrian Amos now, considering we've just now signed another safety. And kind of looking at these numbers, it's like, why didn't we sign Adrian Amos then? He could be still asking too much to where the Packers don't want to sign him. Or they're going to sign him later down the road. I don't know if a lot of teams are still interested in Adrian Amos in the league. There haven't been many grumblings or word. He met with the Ravens at one point this offseason, and nothing came of it. I thought he was actually going to get signed by Baltimore, but he ended up not signing. So after that, it's been relatively quiet on what's happening with Adrian Amos, even on the Packers side of how interested we are in re-signing him. But at the end of the day, the Packers have now signed another safety that's going to compete for a starting job in our overly crowded safety room. And it's going to be an interesting offseason to see who's going to show the most and show they deserve this starting job next to potentially Darnell Savage. And that's honestly if Darnell Savage doesn't get traded away, and then they put Jonathan Owens at strong safety since he's a good in-the-box tackler but terrible in coverage. That would be kind of an upgrade over Darnell Savage since Darnell Savage whiffed a lot. But let me know what you think down in the comments. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, go Pack Go.